queue. Okay, so the 5 file method. The 5 file method is really about building institutional memory, but it's also about checking yourself to ensure that what you're building is quality. And I think we have to talk about this because you need a structured way of building apps if you're going to ship them. And this is one of the things that we want to get to, just to talk about, like, hey, I need to ship products. I need to be able to do this. And I want some consistency across the board. So let's take a look at these two, just so you can see the architecture of this app. Okay. So straightforward, it's just kind of like a 30,000 foot view of this. The backend, how did we do the backend? So you can see profiles, campaigns, media assets, creative projects, asset suggestions. So you can see a full backend here of how this thing works. Front end, just to kind of give you a look of how things are working. How is this set up? We have a dashboard, of course. We have the ID, a campaign, project details, settings, usage. And so this is everything how the front end is set up. Resolutions. This is one of those learning tools. It is looking at the problem, needed to analyze, upload images and video using AI, extracting meaningful insights for creative projects. This captures all of those problems that you ran into. And it also captures the solution. So if I ever do this again, if I ever have to analyze the media, this is some of the things that I'm going to look at. It's just like, hey, we can implement this right here to actually do what we have to do, because the same component is going to be in a different project. That's the power of this. Finally, scalability. Scalability is one of those things that I don't hear people talking about, but is one of those things of saying, hey, what happens when I put this in front of 1,000 people? What happens when I put it in front of 10,000 people? What about 30,000 people? And so you can see here what we're looking at. This scalability thing right here is looking to say what's going to happen. But the idea of just asking, hey, what if I scale this to 10,000 people? What does it have to look like? This is what comes back. Okay. So I just want to kind of give you a quick rundown of this, because one of the things we want to do is kind of say, hey, in any business, you're doing these projects. If I'm in a department and I am doing this, what I can do now is these 5 files for every single project now becomes my knowledge base for building out with AI tools. Okay. So if you think about it, it's just like, hey, we're working on it. And then the expert who is building this thing leaves. And so that's the idea of what we're talking about, renting your people, renting knowledge. And it's one of those things that we need to capture knowledge. But even as an individual, you may do something for a project, 6 months ago. But if you have this knowledge base, then it's something that you can kind of chat with and may spark a memory and say, okay, oh, wow, you know what? I did have this problem. Let me try to avoid it with this next project. All right. So I just showed you the 5 files, the back end, the front end, the architecture, scalability, and resolutions. And the back end is straightforward. We all know what that is. Where does the data live? What are the sources? Is it secure? Okay. And so when we think about this, is that, where it says here, a 3-week decision a 3-week decision becomes a 3-second search. So you made something 3 weeks ago, and now I just search it. So it's like, wait a minute, how did I do the Firebase compliance thing? And it just comes up and shows you this is how you did it. And again, that is your institutional memory. The front end, and this is really just what I showed, just like how did we design the front end? What is the pages? How we're looking at things. So the structure, what's your pages, and we can also look at some of the decisions of like, how long does it take to load a page? What about navigation? So you got pagination. So one of those things that you can look at when you start looking at the front end, and this is going to show when you talk about scalability, why you ask about scalability, because if you did not do some type of pagination with your app and says, hey, when I touch the app, 500 lines of data shows up, well, maybe for that particular page, I only needed 5 lines of data. So it's something to think about with your front end. Okay, so let's talk about architecture. So architecture, as you saw, is kind of like the 30,000 foot view of your app. And really what we're trying to do is just like, hey, what's the flow of the app? Where are users going? And it's kind of giving you kind of like a blueprint of the app. And again, it's one of those things that if you were to take that architecture and then take the front end and back end and actually put it into any Lovable, Bolt, or Gemini builder, you could easily take that and just rebuild the app and get fairly close to the same thing. But one thing all these 5 files do is this. It makes onboarding new people better, easier. But one thing this app does is make onboarding new engineers. So you can take this, and again, you have all of this information. And so you can take all of this information and actually use it as a guide to help other users, help yourself build projects faster. Okay, now the scalability is one of those things where when we think about this is that, how do you scale? Because I can, as far as I'm looking at it and saying, hey, the app works for me, but does it work for teams? Does it work in an enterprise? Does it have to integrate with, D365 or with Salesforce? So you want to talk about that. That's the prompt. It's like, hey, how do I scale this to interact with this particular software? It's about compliance. When we think about it, it's just like, okay, you've built the app and it's living on your desktop, but can you scale it for HIPAA? Can you scale it for SOC 2? So that's the type of thing that you want to think about. Cost. One of the things that always runs up is just like, if I put this out there and the 10,000 people hit on it, how much is that going to cost me? Because I know for one person how much it costs for 10,000 to hit it. And so you want to do that audit, because that audit is going to look and see where are your vulnerabilities in all of these things, and what do you have to do to scale up to address them. So if you know where you want to go, where your final decision is on like how many people are going to do this, how many people are going to use this app, this is the thing you want to do, and just say, hey, I need to be able to scale up to this and get this scaling report, because between this and your current framework and the resolutions will determine like just how much work you have left to do. Start over. And this is where it comes down to, all right? You're just going to ask yourself, it's like, hey, if I built this app for me, can I scale it? Can it go to 10,000 people? That's really what it is. And it's a simple question. And that scalability.md file is going to give you some answers to that. Finally, the resolution. So the resolution is one of the things where we know when you're vibe coding, and for those of us who are not developers, we really aren't software engineers. This is how we kind of really bring in our knowledge, right? That we start to learn, because we can see it's just like, hey, what was the problem? Hit 100 requests, 1 minute limit during the testing. All right. What was the fix? Okay. What did we learn? It's just one of those things as you're producing your app and you see, it's just like, man, why did that image, load so slowly? you start thinking about it. Well, the image is low slowly because it's trying to download a 50 megabyte image. Well, is there a way to fix that? Yes, we can actually get the database to produce a lower resolution image and use that as the thumbnail. Those type of things are the type of things that you want to look at, because it is, when we talk about MCPs, you start looking at the cost of an MCP. All right. And this is what we talk about compounding knowledge, and in every other facet, there's this learning curve. So the learning curve always starts with, hey, the first time I did this project, it took me 5 days to do it. The second time I did it, it took me 4 days to do it. The third time I do it, it took me 3 days to do it. So you can imagine if you have 10 to 15, 20 projects, before you even started your project, you did an audit, you did a search, and you asked your LLM to say, hey, here's the PRD. I want you to go through the history of all my apps and find all of the things the components that match, the problems that I might run into, and submit to me a report. And before you even begin to feed that into Lovable or Bolt or whatever your IDE is, you can then say, okay, let's address these issues that we might have going forward, or at least you're now aware of the issues and know how to fix them. So that's what we talk about, that your organization, you yourself, you get smarter, you get more efficient in building every single project. And this is, in every other facet of life, this is really what happens. I mean, when I teach people how to program robots, this is one of the things that we talk about. It's just like, hey, here is your processes. Here's where you can save defaults. So here's where you can save values. So your next program, you can come back to that, because we don't have to look at what the other websites are saying about the benchmarks. We know we have old project files. And so we can simply say, of the projects that did not work, the ones we had to abandon, new LLM, let's test it against that. And then what you're doing is you're testing it against known failures. And so now I'm looking at the LLM and says, okay, these were the 10 failures that we got last time. Running through the new LLM. Oh, wow. We only have 3 of these. It is much better. And so now you have your own benchmark against your problems, not against some abstract, I don't know how you would. Okay. And that's really what we're talking about here. It's just like, hey, a generic benchmark have that, but your internal benchmarks, the things that that you have problems with, the type of problems that you're trying to solve, you benchmark that against this. That is what your 5 files do. So your 5 files really give you an idea of one, and the prompt to get it is not that difficult. Just say, hey, give me a backend file with some detailed information about the backend, the front end, the architecture, scalability. I want to scale this product to, XYZ. And then all of the issues that you have, that we have building this, give me those issues, and then give me the resolutions for those issues and save them in this file. And these become your 5 files, and this becomes your ability to build and move faster going forward. All right, that's it, and I am out.